Hey guys, what's up? It is Moi. I am here. This video exists because I've been realizing there's a lot of different mediums of this show right now just because me and just the evolution of the show and me figuring what kind of will motivate me the most. Not necessarily motivate, but get my creative juices going a bit more. So there is the podcast, which is the baby. She's still there. Over 700 plus episodes now. So the podcast is still there. And I will get to the point of this. And then there's Patreon, who get this a little bit earlier, get exclusive videos, exclusive podcast recording, and many other things. They basically get to see me make an ass out of myself. I wish a lot more of you guys would watch the Patreon, would sign on to Patreon, so you can watch me geek out to BTS box reveals I'm 5 years old, but it gives me immense joy. There's only so much. So there's the podcast, there's Patreon, and now there's YouTube. But that is to say YouTube, podcast, and Patreon. So there are 3 avenues where you guys could get different shows. I think that's a pretty good deal. So 8 years? God, I don't even know. 7+ years of this podcast, insanity. But yes. So that is why I wanted to do this video, because again, some people might just be watching Patreon videos, some people might just be listening to the podcast, and some people might only be checking me out on YouTube. So I feel like this video might be a good merge, at least for YouTube listeners or watchers, and Patreon at minimum. And if I have time, maybe I'll just make an MP3 out of this and upload it, and then we can all know about each other. Every podcast can know YouTube exists, and YouTube can know Patreon exists, and nobody feels like we're cheating on each other. But just ultimately, I want to make sure this reaches you guys. I enjoy doing this, but I also want to make sure it reaches the audience that, wants to watch it. So yes, all of that. So what am I here today to do? I'm essentially going to be talking about a couple of shows that I have covered over the past couple of months on the podcast. Like I said, you might listen to one medium and you might not. But also, if you have listened to the podcast and you're also watching this, you get a different feel for some of the things. So I am here today to talk about 8 shows really quickly, because the majority of these shows already have detailed podcast episodes that you can go listen to me drone on. So let's jump into it. The first 2 shows I'm going to be talking about are Chinese drama, Sword Snow Stride, and it is a wuxia drama. But if you don't know what a wuxia is, I feel even if you don't know the terminology, you definitely know the genre. So wuxia it features warriors from ancient China, and they're basically the Marvel superheroes of ancient China, if that makes sense. So they're capable of doing superhuman feats. They're the ones with the special fancy swords. They're the ones who are Matrixy with it. They're the ones who if you watch The Untamed, they have guitars for instruments, but it's just essentially a lot of fighting. That is what wuxia is supposed to be. This show, I feel, Sword Snow Stride, embodies more the spirit of wuxia than the letter of the word of wuxia. Because for me, as someone who's been watching Chinese dramas for a while, no one really does authentic wuxia, because you would have to get people who are trained in that. If you remember when I'm dating myself here, but if you remember when Jackie Chan first became famous, back in the 70s and 80s, before he became a weird CCP fanboy, he has, find out. But before he became who he is now, 30 years ago, he was trained in martial arts, and then he became a movie star. Unfortunately, a lot of movies today have movie stars who are not trained in martial arts, and that's sort of where you are with a lot that's why there isn't a lot of like genuine, there's going to be a lot of hands things today. But that's why there isn't a lot of genuine wuxia dramas. So that's why I'm saying this is a wuxia drama in spirit, but not technically in name. If you know of any good wuxia dramas out there that I could watch, email works, tvmoviemistress@gmail.com. Okay, so let's kick off with Sword Snow Stride. It's 38 episodes, initially aired on CCTV, Tencent, Viki, YouTube. It's up to 20 episodes on Viki, which Viki is never ahead of like shows when they drop, so I'm kind of like surprised, but I might let you know why in a second, why that might be happening. But to my knowledge, Viki and possibly YouTube might have the most currently out and subbed. Like, again, mystified because Viki... people will be yelling like, where are the English subs? But it's also like a fan-based type show. But I guess that just means like a lot of the translators are fans of this show. This show is based on a super famous Chinese web novel, and it was adapted for the screen by the same screenwriter of Joy of Life. So if you watch Joy of Life, I feel like it kind of has that same, it has the same feel of Joy of Life, where there's just a lot happening, you're not really sure, you feel dumb, and like I kind of like a show that makes me feel dumb, kind of like Sherlock Holmes when you watch it, and you're just like, I have no idea what's happening, but then by the end of it, he solves it, and you're like, oh, of course. So that's more how I feel watching the show, and I've watched the first 8 episodes. This show I have not done a podcast for, actually, because it just like aired, I think, a week ago. But supposedly it's off to a bad start in terms of low ratings, so the networks have just decided to move it off prime time and dump out all the episodes, which, harsh. Like, I know it's all advertising dollars, but it's kind of also like intonating that low ratings equal a good drama, or low ratings equal a bad drama, and that's not how any of that works. But yeah, that might explain why Viki just has all the episodes, because they're like, yeah, you got it, release it, we don't care, they've moved on. So this show, quick synopsis: Zhang Ruiyun plays Su Fengnian, who is basically like the son of a general, who will go through a lot of shit to eventually become king of Northern Liang. But essentially, when we're introduced to him in this story, his dad is like a massacre of people. Like, he is famous for basically like subjugating everyone else. Like, killing them. I don't mean like, hey, sit down, guys. Like, no, massacre, full-scale massacre is what his father is known for. So he's a general who has just subjugated mass people for the imperial crown. He's not emperor. His father's not emperor. But he's basically like one step below the emperor. So, I think that's a pretty sweet deal, because you don't get like people yelling in your face saying it's all your it's all your fault, because if you're the head, like, everyone can see you. So powerful, probably more powerful than the actual emperor, because he does the actual warrioring, which is not a word, but he's also a general. He has an army. If you're just an emperor on a throne, like, who has never left to like go see people die, like, yeah, it makes sense why a lot of these generals just were like, this is my shit now. I would too. Like, why am I sending folks to die and doing all the hard work so you can like pretend you run shit? Get out of here. But yeah, so he plays the son of this general who has just killed everyone. And when the story starts, we see him coming off like 3 years of what is supposed to be like him living his best life, but you see it's just him pretending to be a peasant trying to get back home, because he is his father's son and everybody wants to kill him, so he can't really like go on vacation. So, of course, if you know the actor, he is very charming. Like, he is also one of those actors. What I like about him, he's like, he uses his body. As you can tell, I'm someone who uses like my body and everything. So in the sense of like, it's not like an imperial drama where like it's just them like holding their hands or like hands at sight. Like he he evokes shit. So I like that. So yeah, and the father is played by Yu Jun. I love this old man. Like, after a while, you can tell that a show is going to be really good, not necessarily by the leads, but by the ancillary characters. Like, whoever plays like the older person in the show, maybe there's a second lead, a best friend, like that adds to the quality of the show, and Yujin is that. So yeah, he plays his father. He plays this guy who's supposed to be like the worst in everything, just terrible person. But you're introduced to him as this man who's afraid of his son, and it's so funny because again, it's like he's a terrible person who will kill hundreds of thousands of people, but we're introduced to him as like this jovial fellow. Whose son hates him, and yeah, he just seems lovely, but everyone's also like, please don't kill us. And it's just so funny. So it's like the show does a good job of pushing the funny, but under that you just feel there's some shit simmering. I would say for the first 7 to 8 episodes that I've watched, not a lot of martial arts, but there are some cool scenes with, like, he has an Alfred. He has a old man who is his friend, who was with him for 3 years, who is like 9 flying swords, I believe he's called. But yeah, he basically has this case of swords, and he is like a famous martial arts master. There's this other master who like basically lives underneath a lake, and he's got skills like throwing like knife things, so that's pretty cool to see. But yeah, not necessarily a lot. The complaint out on the internet is that it is also very slow moving, because that is what directors do when their actors don't know how to do martial arts. They just sort of slow it like a ballet, and yeah, a lot of people are angry at that because this should be a wuxia. And again, I'm saying it's a wuxia in spirit, not in practice. I'm kind of happy I went into it not knowing that was like an expectation, honestly. So another character that we have Jiang Ni, who's basically this lost princess of another country that his father conquered. She's grown up with him. They might be love interests or they might be like siblings. I can't tell yet. You have Nangan Puche, who is played by Zhang Tian-ai, and she basically plays this ethereal master who is a woman but will kill everyone. So from there, another show I want to talk about, this I spoke about extensively when it was airing, and that's because it's basically a BL fantasy drama about a ex-assassin of a sect who worked for the emperor, who retires by basically putting 7 nails on his body, which is going to lead to his slow death. He does that. Zhao Sushi, who is played by Zhang Zhahan, the character he plays, Zhao Sushi, does this because he's basically become the head of the CIA for the emperor, but he's also like lost all his friends and bros in the process. So he's just like, fuck this shit, I'm out. And he retires. He wanders the world as like a traveling drunk beggar. And in the process, he meets Gong Jun's character, Wen Kei Sheng, who is basically the lord of the underworld in a sense, another sect. But yeah, the story is essentially, it's a convoluted one, but it's fun. Again, all these shows I'm mentioning, I go in detail on the podcast, TV Movie Mistress. You guys can listen on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, online, down, like everywhere you can listen to podcasts. Like you could literally just go to Google and type TV Movie Mistress and the show title, and the episode will pop up. So Word of Honor, though, is ultimately a story of revenge. You've got Wen Kei Sheng, who his plan is to take revenge on the 5 sects, these like the top 5 sects, the 5 Lakes Alliance, who he blames for the death of his parents. And he's now a bad boy. So he's a bad boy on a quest for revenge. And Sao Shu-shi is a good boy who has done bad things, who now feels really bad. So, angst. So yes, the story is about these two male leads, and I'm also burying a lead somewhere that I'm going to touch upon in a second, but it's about these two male leads, one's quest on this tale of revenge, the shitty-ass Five Lakes Alliance, and then Wen Kei-shing's character, again, he's a lot of the underworld. He comes out of the underworld with his little sister, who is annoying at first, but then you just fall in love with her characters. And as a younger sister who was like taken in by an older brother, it gave me all the feels, because it's that relationship where, in a sense, they're your older sibling, but they're also your parental figure, and that just matured lovely throughout the series, in my opinion. This show was produced on a shoestring budget. They went through a second group of casting. The only one who lasted from the initial casting was the actress who played the daughter. So they had to do a lot on nothing. And I think they did excellent on that. No one was expecting it to blow up. It ended up blowing up so big that the male lead character ended up in a scandal that has now led to him no longer being able to be in the entertainment business in China. So essentially, quick side note, after the success of this show, it came out where he was getting like all the ads, all the like scripts thrown at him. And it came out that he had visited like a couple of shrines in Japan, and these were shrines, I don't remember the specifics, but these shrines either like commemorated fallen Japanese soldiers who had like killed Chinese soldiers. There was like some country issues with him visiting these shrines, and even the Emperor of Japan has not visited this shrine. That's how like politically like you don't want to go there is. But the place is gorgeous. It's just like, it just looks like a super big park, but like, if you know what it is. So pictures came out of him going to this place, and he has now been banned from ever and like being in entertainment right at the peak height of his acting career. And all I can think is, damn, who did you make so mad that these just came out? Because this took place years ago, and somebody was like, I got you, and they got him. Word of Honor, I loved it. So you had the daughter relationship. You had, like, they basically, like I said, I'm burying the lead. The lead is essentially, this is like a BL, fantasy drama, which, China does not, like, allow LGBTQ friendly shows on TV. So people just always like insinuate, so as to get this show on the air so it doesn't get like banned, because again, there's a commission, there's like a censorship board that reviews everything that goes on television, and if there's something there that they don't like, maybe something that's derogatory to the current ruling like power, or something that they felt like disrespected an era, leader, specific ones, like it will not go on air. So LGBTQ friendly shows are not on air. So again, a lot of insinuations. And I never know how these shits pass, because I was watching Word of Honor. It was just like eye fucking, two dudes eye fucking for like however many episodes, and I was just like, I was like, who let this pass? I was like, it has to be like some super straight guy who just did not comprehend, because I was like, this sexual tension, what the hell? Of course, BL stands for boy love, which is just basically like when the story is centered around two males. It's a love story. And that's not allowed. So like once in a while you'll get like a show that just slides in and does gangbusters and numbers, and then like censorship gets mad and a whole bunch of new rules come into play until fanfic authors figure out a way to get around whatever new law the CCP has come up. I love it. It's like, I don't know, I love it. It's like, you guys don't get to have LGBTQ shows banned. Well, I mean, it's technically not banned this time around. They just come up with like a bunch of weird laws, like your characters can't be too pretty, dumb shit. But anyway, they'll come up with these rules, and like fanfic authors or script writers will just be like, fine, you don't want pretty boys. Now it's just gonna be like super buff dudes I fucking each other. So, I mean, like, great job. So, yeah, and then there's another character in Word of Honor that I love. He is the leader of the Scorpion sect, and he is just extra as fuck. Like, I love him. He's the bad guy. He also has, like, a weird, sketchy relationship with his, like, adopted father that like, if you watch the show, hit me up, because we both know it's weird. They don't quite go there, but man, that was awkward. Yeah, so those are my first two. Swords No Stride, still in progress of watching, but I highly recommend. And Word of Honor, which aired months ago, has been hilarious. I loved it, thoroughly enjoyed it. It's funny, it's got edge to it, and it's just, the characters make it the best thing ever. It's one of those shows where you don't need $100 million. I think they did it for like 21 to 30 million range, but like normally this type of show would be like 100 million is the point. So, but it's still well acted. The story still makes an impact, and that's another reason I just adore it. You know, outside of all and Simon Gong Jun, who plays the other lead, fantastic actor. I like watching him in a lot of stuff. He's also been in like 6 shows this year, and I'm like, dude, chill. But yeah, so also like the guy who plays, the young boy who plays their adopted, like they take him on because like everybody else in his life is trash. Love that story. But yeah, Imperial Court, Fighting World, sex, weird adopted father, homoerotic undertones, no undertones at all with the 2 leads. So next show. The next 2 shows, the first one is going to be Warrior. The first one is going to be Warrior. I'm actually covering this on the podcast every like 2 to 3 episodes with my favorite person in the world, Carly. I have podcasted The 100. We did 7 seasons of The 100 together. Absolute joy. The 100 is basically the metaverse, but you know, deadly. Just so if you have no faith in humanity, go watch that show. You'll love it, because I love it. But anyway, let me not digress. Which actually aired on HBO Max or Cinemax in 2019. And then unfortunately it got canceled after season 2 because Cinemax merged with HBO and then became like HBO Max, some weird thing. So it didn't get canceled because of a ratings thing. It got canceled because of a merger. And then the fans complained, and now we've got season 3. We have reviewed the first season. Again, that is literally the podcast, so you guys can go listen to me in depth talk about this wonderful show. It takes place in 1870 San Francisco. It is about this hot-blooded man by the name of Assam, who's basically like a Chinese fighting prodigy who leaves China, comes to America, specifically San Francisco, to find his sister, who had been sold in marriage to a general in China, but then she eventually made her way over to the States, and he's there to save his older sister and take her back home, and none of that will happen. But yeah, so he immigrates from China to San Francisco to find his sister. The show is led by Andrew Koji. It is a wonderful cast and crew. I could honestly talk for days about this, and I do on the podcast, but Assam is just stubborn as fuck. I love him. He doesn't listen. He's got all the hands. He's basically like half Chinese, half American, but he looks fully Chinese. Oh no, half Chinese, half white. Like half Chinese. But Yeah, I love this show specifically because of the woman, though. This is a great show. If you know me, my shows have to have a good woman. They have, not like a good woman. They've got to have a bad bitch. If you know, I want to get literal, but they have to have a woman who is not your typical Mary Sue, who's complicated, who is indifferential to like men, even if she fucks them. But yeah, I just like a story that puts women at the forefront. I don't really think there's anything wrong with saying that. There are a shit ton of shows that I watch that have men in the forefront, and now there are a good number of shows that have women in the forefront causing the problems men would normally cause. So I don't get into this too much, but he comes to America. The sister he has come to save is now basically the number two of like the top gang in San Francisco. She's married to the number one, so she is number two, and she is just not the older sister he remembers. He's expecting to come save a damsel, and she will slice your throat. So you're not coming to save anyone. He quickly joins a gang. Turns out the gang he joins is a rival gang of his sister. He does not listen. He starts an affair with the white woman really quickly. And you're just like, sir, it's 1870 San Francisco. Stop giving me anxiety. But I love it. This show has got all the hands. This show has all the hands people wished Sword Snow Stride had, and it's deadly, it's brutal, it's got a great story, but man, like the fight scenes. Oh, probably should have led with that. This show is based on a story, or inspired by a story by Bruce Lee, literal prodigy, from back in the day, and they made it into a show. He always, he would pitch the show and they'd be like, well, gotta do it with white men. A couple of decades later, it has now been made. But there is a good blend. What I like about the show is the blend of Asian characters, white characters. You got the Irish and their drama. And since this takes place after the Civil War, I love it because like people are being rude as fuck to racists. It's lovely. They're like, didn't you guys lose a Civil War? I was like, why am I laughing? Because it's hilarious, because they did. But yeah, it's really good. Highly recommend. Next show, The Harder They Fall. This one is on Netflix. This is actually a movie. It's an all-star cast movie. This show has, just to kick off a couple of names, Jonathan Majors as Nat Love, Zazie Beetz as Mary Fields. You've got Eddie Gathegi, RJ Clymer, Damon Wayans Jr., like I stated, Idris Elba, one of my Lakeith Stanfield is in it. One of my favorite people, Regina King, and I reviewed this on the podcast with Joanne, and we go in depth. Like, it was a star-studded not reinterpretation. It was basically like a star-studded Western with a bunch of like black people as the leads, and you don't often see that, which made it very well worth it being made. I don't know how many times I get to see so many fantastic black actors just have fun in a show, so it's great for that. I do have some criticisms about the show, but overall it's a fun 2-hour Western with good actors who have fun on screen, and black people don't often get that as a genre, so I enjoyed it. The story is basically about like this dude that Jonathan Major plays, Nat Love, who is a robber, I guess. That's basically Guns and Robbers, Western style, honestly. But he is on the lookout for the character Idris Elba plays for revenge. I like revenge tales, I guess. But yeah, it is Nat Love's gang and Rufus Buck, who is played by Idris Elba's gang. Now, my theory is this movie is not really Idris Elba's movie or Jonathan Majors movie. This is Regina King's movie, and the sequel to this should just be Regina King leading it because she was like scary as fuck. Like, she scared me more than Idris Elba's character, who was supposed to be like the main bad guy, and I was just like, no, you're just crazy. Like, she's scary, you're crazy. There's a difference. So yeah, the soundtrack is insane. Also, money went into this, so that was also nice to see. This, one of the producers was Jay-Z. Like, that was a thing. So yeah, this show had like everyone in it behind the scenes, and I enjoyed that about it. Like, again, you can catch it on Netflix. It's a fun 2 hours, but don't go in with like expecting like an Oscar winning like Western movie, but it's still a fun Western movie. Oh, something else I probably should have mentioned about The Harder They Fall is the fact that I mentioned like the two gangs earlier. All the characters in this are loosely based on African American historical figures. So like Nat Love is an African American historical figure. You've got Bill Pickett, African American historical figure. So these are like people who either were figures post-slavery or pre-slavery, but people that if we hear their stories today would just seem like a folk tale, but like they lived their lives and they did extraordinary things, but I guess for them it was just living their lives, and for us it's like, wow. I would just sit down and never get up. But yeah, so some other folks like Trudy Smith, you've got Cherokee Bill, who Lakeith Stanfield plays. So yeah, I really enjoyed this show. I liked what it attempted to do. I think it succeeded, even though it faltered in some places. But the faltering did nothing to like take away from my enjoyment of the show. And again, you can listen to what I'm trying to say more on the podcast. I reviewed this, like I said, with Jawan. It was fun, and we had a great time talking about it.